Thanks, members. Can I welcome everybody to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee on Monday, the 30th of January from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 7:33. My name is Councillor Neil Cutler, Chairperson of the committee. This meeting is audio recorded, live streamed, and will be available on the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available, and advice on how to turn this on is set out on our website. If you are joining us online, please turn your camera and microphone off until you tell your item. I don't think there will be any interventions online. So I think Councillor Clear is watching. Can everyone ensure that their mobile phones are on silent? Can I remind members to not to do what I'm doing, but to use their microphones and speak directly into them? I find reading and speaking directly into them is more difficult. To enable your comments to be picked up on the recording of the meeting. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. So to the agenda. Item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies, Nancy?
No apologies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Disclosure of interest. Does any member have any interests they wish to disclose? Councillor Krask.
Thank you, Chair. A disclosure of interest around being a personal and non-prejudicial interest as an employee.
Thank you. No others? Because of the resignation of Councillor Bronk from the committee, we need to elect a vice chairperson. Can I have nominations, please? Councillor Laming.
Councillor Crass.
So, Councillor Krask, are you prepared to accept a nomination?
Yes, thank you.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Those in favour? That's unanimous. If you'd like to come and join me. Thank you. I'll move on to item 4, the chairperson's announcements. We had a standard subcommittee last week, and although we actually only have one more scheduled meeting in this municipal year, it may be necessary to schedule a further one item meeting later in March, probably pre-PERDA. Well, in fact, it would have to be pre-PERDA to consider some aspects of that standards committee. There'll be more detail at the next one. I'm just giving notice that that's a possibility. Not something the Democratic Services team are too keen on, but if it's necessary, we will do it. And the only other thing I'd like to just mention is that those of you that remember Joseph Holmes, our former financial officer, director here, is at West Berks, and he has instigated a regional audits chairs meeting, which I attended. Well, this will be the second one that I've attended this morning. We had some interesting discussions on risk management, and it's quite interesting to hear others' views on that, and particularly highlighted the difficulties of about cumulative risks across cumulative effect of different risks, which I think we've discussed before in our meeting, and how that relates to risk, setting the risk appetite. We had an interesting discussion on the effects of inflation and the fact that we all need to be sort of fairly differential about different rates of inflation in different areas and how that affects different parts of the council. And we had quite a discussion about external audit, and the general view of those attending was that the system does seem to be under extreme strain, or as someone described it, that the system as it exists is now broken, because there are quite a few councils that haven't signed off the 2021 accounts. So that's a brief summary of that meeting. It is quite useful, and I think it's worth attending to try and get ideas from how other audit committees. Any questions? No. Well, we'll move on to business items. Item 5. Note the audit and governance work programme. Are we happy to note that work programme for the upcoming items? And are there any? I mean, as you can see, we've got a pretty full agenda for the the 2nd of March meeting. As I say, we may need what would be a fairly one subject meeting after that, because I don't know if we can go into the detail of the standard side of things at the 2nd of March meeting. Are you happy to note work programme? The minutes of the previous meeting held on the 10th of November, Councillor Bronk has notified me of an amendment, which I think has been tabled. Nancy, because you just read it out, just.
Yes, sure. Councillor Bronk has requested a correction that he did declare an interest in respect of report AG0026. It was a personal but not prejudicial interest in respect of that item, and we will correct the minutes to note that.
With that amendment, are we happy to accept the minutes for that meeting? Public participation. Councillor Westwood, who's now our deputy, I think is here for see how it all works. You don't wish to say anything at this stage, do you? Sorry, that was a leading question, but item 8. We'll move on to item 8, which is the audit results report for the year ending 31st of March 2022, pages 11 to 16 on the pack. Redactions have been made to this report as it is there was some exempt information relating to so I'll hand over to Kevin and James to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're pleased to provide to you the audit results report, and I'll take the report as read, but I'd like to just highlight some areas that may be of note to the committee. So starting with page 17 in your reporting packs, this provides the scope update to our audit plan, which we provided to you last year. And the first point just notes the change in materiality based on your draft financial statements. And the second of all relates to the portfolio heading changes, which came with those draft financial statements. We just had to do some additional work in that area to confirm the mapping was consistent with the prior year, moving into the current year with those changes in the cost of services headings. And the final scope update was relating to a prior year restatement relating to a finance lease. And it was due to an embedded finance lease for refuse vehicles. We just had to do some work to confirm that prior restatement was accurate, and the figures flowing into the 21-22 accounts were also correct, and no issues were identified with that. So then moving on to page 18 in the pack, it refers to the status of the audits. And you'll note that there are a number of items we've said that they're ongoing at this stage before we can issue what we hope to be an unqualified opinion. The first item on that list is completion of PPE and IP valuation following receipt of an updated valuation for one asset. We've received that today, so that should be able to close down that area. For pensions liability, which is point 2, we're still waiting for the final confirmation from the pension fund auditors that we have all the assurances we need in that area. But as the partner for the pension fund audit is sitting to my left, I can tell you that there should be no issues in that area, so we should be able to sign off on that as well. So all we're really waiting on is just the finalised accounts, which we'll review just to confirm all the amendments are made as expected, and a few other items as standard, so the letter of representation, that sort of thing, before we can then sign the audit. Moving on to page 21 of the reporting pack, it just is a couple of items we want to make the committee aware of in terms of control observations. So the first one being the review of contracts. So you'll note I mentioned earlier about that prior period restatement relating to an embedded lease. We've just requested that going forward, management do perform an annual review of contracts, particularly the new contracts that have occurred in year, to check for embedded leases or such type that may be required to be added into the financial statements. The second item on that listing is regarding related party transactions. So we noted that in year there was not a full list of signed documentations of declarations declaring interests. And while we were able to perform procedures and agree that there were no additional related parties that had not been disclosed, it would be preferable to have an annual signed list from members. So moving down to page 33 in your reporting packs, this is relating to the summary of adjusted and unadjusted differences. So we wanted to highlight to you a couple of main corrections which were greater than our materiality level, 1.76 million, and these were both relating to the cash flow statement. And we also had a couple of items relating to PPE. And just really wanted to note that there's been one uncorrected non-material difference related to a surplus asset and one corrected difference relating to an asset valued at depreciated replacement cost within other land and buildings. Page 36 in the reporting pack relates to value for money. And while the main details of the value for money report will be presented in our auditor's annual report, which we delivered within 3 months of issuing the audit opinion, what we can say at this stage is we've identified no risks in relation to the value for money. And finally, on page 45 of your reporting packs, just to bring the committee's attention, the audit fees, most notably the fee for 2021. This has now been finalised with the PSAA and approved. And so you'll note the final figures that were there. And this was essentially lower than what EY had submitted. And while we don't fully know the audit fee that will be for this year, currently at this time, I've left in basically what we proposed for the fee in the prior year. So I'll be able to give you a more detailed fee analysis with the auditor's annual report once we finalise all details in relation to PPE. So that's all I had to bring to your attention at this time. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, James. Questions then? Councillor,
Thank you. Materiality. The notes that were made on page 17. Executive summary. I'd hesitate to be worried about anything which has so many zeros in. But how can we not be concerned about £2 million worth of difference of fluctuations, which you're treating as material, but worried about much smaller amounts when they're dealing with expenditure? What is it that the audit committee should be worrying about as far as materiality is concerned?
So we don't set a different materiality for different figures within your accounts. So you should be as equally worried about valuations that are wrong by a number that's in excess of materiality as you should be worried about expenditure that would be wrong by that number in excess. So we highlight to you all the differences that we identify through the audit for your information. The committee should be worried if we are bringing to you items that are above the materiality. We're able to report to you that we have none above that level, so we view the accounts as materially correct and true and fair. If we didn't, we would certainly be highlighting that as the main reporting point and definitely bringing that to your attention.
Are you done with it? It's unusual for you not to ask a supplementary, so I was just waiting for the opportunity. Are there any further questions to the report? Oh, well, I'm surprised by that, but Councillor Bolton has got a comment.
It was just about the risk assessment and status of value for money work, where you said about council that we've previously reported to the council that our assessment of the risk of significant weaknesses in the council's value for money arrangements remained ongoing, but at this stage we have not identified any risk. I found that a bit odd. That if you have found weaknesses in there, then there's some risks attached to it.
We haven't found weaknesses. We start off with a risk assessment. At that risk assessment stage, we didn't find any risk of weakness. As we've conducted the audit, we haven't found any weaknesses.
I think it may come down to the way that it's written that it has caused a little bit of confusion. I've previously reported to the council that our assessment of the risk of significant remains ongoing, and it sounds as if you're sort of there is an ongoing look at significant weaknesses, but I take.
We do keep that process ongoing right up to the point we actually sign. So if something came to light 20 minutes before I planned on signing, we would have to think about it. But as at this stage, nothing of that nature at all.
Thanks for that reassurance. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue of the length of time it's taken to reach this point worries me, because 4 years ago, government told us we had just 3 months after the end of the financial year to complete the audit and close the account. Here we are 10 months later. I know we had an extension because of COVID and all the pressures on everyone. How do we get back to 3 or 6 months, the original period? What is it that is stopping us reaching a conclusion to each year's account within a fixable timescale?
So I think this goes back to Councillor Cutler's earlier comments. The system is broken. Now, it may not be broken, but it is certainly badly damaged. We have a significant backlog of work, as do all audit suppliers. That really came out of the system during COVID. I think that was a point where all the risks and issues crystallised while we had problems conducting efficient audits on site at councils as we previously had. So we've had a backlog. We've had changing rules. So the National Audit Office changed the requirements through the Code of Audit Practice, which meant more work. We've had changing rules from the FRC, who set out the guidelines of how we have to undertake that work, requiring us to do more work in certain areas, particularly those associated with estimates. And so when we've got more work to do with a backlog, it's not clearing. We've got issues at other authorities, not at Wishes Council, on national issues such as accounting for infrastructure assets, which is significantly holding up a number of authorities across the country. So the backlog is not going down at the moment, it's going up. From our perspective, we're not happy about it. What we're trying to do is we have the new PSAA contracts coming in a couple of years' time. So we took a deliberate position. We would bid for less work on a level which we think we can sustainably manage. So when that comes in, we will have less work to complete as compared to this point. So we think we will be able to more effectively deliver more audits by the end of September, which is the current timescales. We still have to clear that backlog between now and then. So we are investing in our staffing, we're investing in our training to try and bring more people into our team, so we get more people in to clear that backlog as fast as we can. So I think it's going to be a long-term position. The whole system definitely needs somebody to get to grips with it as a system leader, bring all of the aspects together, so we can work forward in a coordinated manner, because a lot of the factors at the moment seem to be working against each other. If we can do that with all the players, then hopefully within a couple of years' time, we can definitely start seeing these backlogs coming down, and we can start hitting the 30th of September, which we would all fundamentally agree would be a better thing. So we're trying to set out plans, but there are a lot of factors outside of our control that we are liaising with wider stakeholders to try and pull together.
Councillor Krask had a question then.
Thank you, Chair. So we may not have any weaknesses, but is there anything that we could do differently to improve the process, perhaps to make it generally more effective, specifically to reduce the additional work required? For example, work needed to review the PPE assets. Is there anything we could do differently in that space?
So we've encountered some problems on some particular assets this year. We've already talked with the officers about how we can try and avoid them next year, which I think I would describe as if you have sort of unique circumstances or odd assets, leave a description there. If your property services team could be more involved in looking at the data as presented to your valuers, making sure the valuers have full and complete information, I think that would certainly help the process, rather than looking at it just at the back end, or only looking at it when we're highlighting some variances. So I think there's certainly something around that of getting involved, your own internal experts at an earlier stage when you're sending off the information and the instructions to your external valuers to provide the valuations to you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Should we be worried if Ernst & Young are going to start pulling out of the audit of local authorities? There's only a fairly small pool doing it anyway. And if everybody's having the same problems as you, are we in real danger at some point? There'll be authorities that can't find an auditor.
At the present point in time, no. So PSAA have just awarded the contracts for 5 years from 2023-24. They have awarded all the contracts they set out. There has been turnover, so some firms have left the market, other firms have come back in. As part of that, there are some new suppliers, so hopefully they will be able to get to grips with the sector and then provide a greater level of capacity. If you'd have asked me about a year ago, I probably would have said you should be worried, but given the PSAA's position, I think we're okay for the next 5 or so years. EY are not pulling out of the market. What we are doing is right-sizing the amount that we can sustainably deliver, so we can hit those targets, but we have no intention of pulling out of the market. Yes, and we need to maintain the right level of audits that we can actually look after, as you put it, rather than a number which we can't.
Any other questions? I think it's been useful to have this conversation. I think one of the frustrations for us is that there are relatively minor problems to sort out towards the end. We had this timetabled for our November meeting. We timetabled a December meeting where we thought everything could be resolved, and because they weren't major issues, I know we're not complex compared with a lot of councils. It is frustrating that we get caught in the rolling problem across the sector, I suppose. And Councillor Krask asked the question about how we might improve that. There's also seems to be something else around the fact that we're a small council where the audits aren't too complicated compared with many. How we can separate ourselves off from the more complicated ones and get them done so they're out of the way. Maybe I'm not describing it very well, but it is a frustration, particularly for the staff here, I think, where we're having to deal with this at the same time as, the workload is on budgeting at the moment. And this is a distraction to a certain extent by this stage. And if it could be cleared before Christmas, it would make a huge difference, I think, to the finance team. So I'm sort of imploring we can find ways of doing that in the future. But thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the work that you have done. And let's hope we can get it all complete by the end of the week. Or is that being too optimistic?
Bearing in mind my diary and the fact I am really struggling with an ear infection, a touch optimistic, I'm afraid, but that's not it's not your fault. We will do our best.
Thank you very much. Now, go back to the agenda and trying to remember what we have to do. Right, we've considered the matters presented report. The letter of representation we have to approve, but we can't do that at the moment, can we?
So the letter of representation, as in the pack, is fine. The only thing we don't have is the final numbers to put in there in reference to. Sorry, just give me a moment. Sorry, yeah, paragraph A5. We don't have the final schedule for paragraph A5, which would be the unadjusted audit differences. Other than that, the letter would be unchanged.
Committee, can I ask you to delegate approval of that to me as chair when it's ready? Do that? Is that agreed? Or it looks as if we might not be sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin and James. If you have this severe ear infection, I suggest you might want to go home. Or do you want to stay for the final discussion of the account?
Well, I think we better stay for the accounts, because if anything comes up, we might have to react to it.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for the offer.
So we'll move on to agenda item 9, the annual financial report. We have had good walkthrough of those this report informally before the meeting. I'm just getting my way through the agenda back here. So can I ask or Councillor Power, would you like to make a few comments?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm always quite delighted with the narrative of this report. I can find the information I want in it, unlike the statutory report. So I'd be very interested if this committee thinks the narrative can be improved in any way as to how we actually move that forward. Because I think we're all in the same boat when it comes to accounts. They're necessary, but they don't tell the story. I think we should thank officers yet again for producing these accounts. I know we've looked at these before. I think it's worthwhile saying that. But I welcome questions Chairman. Thank you. Any technical ones to Mrs. Keys?
Thank you, Councillor Power. So, do we have questions on the report? As I say, we had a fairly good informal session on there, but I didn't know if there were any questions that discussion created. Councillor Godfrey.
There's one detailed report, which I hope Ms. Keys was going to be able to answer beforehand. In section 8, note 18, the report dealing with investment properties, the headline figure of 3.8 million pounds of income, but then £700,000 for expenses, which seems an amount. I wonder if there's any information about what it is that we're having to expend money on our properties.
I don't have precise figures in front of me, but I did have a look earlier at the breakdown. So, excuse me, roughly £250,000 is a recharge from our estates team for the cost of managing the investment property. So largely staff costs, but also valuation costs as a smaller element. About 150,000 is management and maintenance of the general fund garages, which, as you recall, transferred from the housing revenue account to the general fund and are now held in investment properties. The third largest item is business rates, which was 98,000. And then below that, there's things like insurance premiums, etc. So it's and general maintenance and some utilities costs. So it's the cost of maintaining the investment properties.
Do we have any other questions?
Thank you. Just looking at page 82, the general fund, an underspend of 1.6. Kind of good news, bad news, I think, from this. It does speak to one-off expenditure, major project expenditure to future periods. Underspend because major project expenditure periods. What major projects have been moved to future periods?
That's the narrative.
This will relate to one-off projects such as Central Winchester Regeneration, where it's one-off revenue budgets that, due to the nature of it being a project, they've slipped into future years.
I may. We had a problem with many major projects throughout the period of COVID, where we had either staff working on other things, which was quite a dramatic load on resources, or we couldn't get any builders to quote for prices on any major projects. It was a period of great upheaval. And then sometimes, of course, costs were coming in at 40% overestimate, which meant business justification had to be revisited.
Some flavour of.
Yes, it does. Thank you. As if I may, Chair, I did say I get a sense of good news, bad news. Some of the good news is that income's increased in the environment line, particularly for planning fees and recycling income. Do we imagine that good news is going to continue in those places for next year?
Thank you, Chair. We are certainly experiencing increased income from our recycling. That is predominantly from increased prices in the market for the materials that go to the recycling facility. and we are expecting those prices to stay at those levels into next year. With planning fee income, we are anticipating that will again stay at that level.
Thank you. Do we have further questions? There are no questions. Does anyone have any broad comments on the or any debate on the annual report? Councillor Miller.
Presumably this will have to be changed for the things that have been agreed in the last 24 hours or whatever it was. So how are we going to sign these off tonight? Or are we going to sign them off with your authority to adjust them when they're finished?
Well, yes, I mean, if we've reached the point of moving to the recommendations, I mean, fundamentally, you'll see that the recommendation does say that the choices that we approve if we can, which we can't because it obviously does need to be updated. So that would move us into recommendation 2, that the Audit and Governance Committee delegates to the chair of the Audit and Governance Committee the approval of the audit statement of accounts. Your alternative is to say we will not approve them until the next meeting on the 2nd of March. But I think what we've done in other years is delegate that approval, because the changes will be purely the knock-on effects of what's been agreed, but they won't be materially different because we've agreed that they're not. So, well, they're not huge changes. Would that be fair to say?
Some of the amendments to be made are material, but once we've made the amendments, there will be no material differences that the auditors are concerned about.
Right, that puts it more clearly than I had. So there are material changes, but they net each other out. So there's no material change in the final outcome. So if we have no further discussion on it, I will come to the recommendations. And since recommendation 1 is not an option, is the committee happy to go to recommendation 2 and delegate the authority to the chair of the committee to sign off these accounts? Quite happy to have a discussion on that if you want to have one. But any comments on it? Are you happy to agree? Okay. And that includes on completion of the auditor's work. We recommendation 3 as well, presumably. Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry if this is confused there as to where I was. I think that's it. So quite pleased that. Is there anything anyone wishes to raise before I close the meeting? No, well, thank you all for your attendance. Thank you, James and Kevin, for your attendance despite your ill health at the moment, and I hope you recover quickly so that we can get this done. Thank you, everybody.